Today we will talk about prophylaxis. Right before this lecture, I looked at Wikipedia and it says prophylaxis is a Greek word and concept. It means any action taken to guard or prevent beforehand. What is even more interesting is that I found that the same Wikipedia in the same chapter says prophylaxis is also a term in chess. It was introduced by the Grandmaster Aaron Nimzovich in his book My System. The term refers to actions taken by a player to stop the opponent's plans, and moves of this type are often called prophylactic moves. Today we are going to look at a number of examples taken from games of strong players, and we'll look at different situations and different prophylactic moves. But one thing for sure is that this is extremely important part of chess, maybe even one of the most important. Most of us, when we look at chess position, think, what can I do? And we are all in our brilliant ideas, attacks, tactics, and unfortunately, a pretty large part of the games we lose because we don't pay enough attention to opponent's threats. So without further ado, let's start looking at the examples. The first position I would like to show to you is a game between two good players. White is Tukmakov and black is Goodman. It's white to move. In some of the examples I'm going to show to you, to find the opponent's idea will already be a challenge. And in some, it will come naturally, it will be not too hard. In this particular position, though it's white to move, you have to ask a question: if I pass, what will be my opponent's next move? So I suggest you pause the recording and try to find the answer on this question. And the answer is that black would like to play this interesting tactical move, knight g4. And in case if white takes the bishop, black's plan is to play rook takes f3, which will follow with queen takes h2 checkmate. If you see this idea, I'm sure the first instinct would be to play move like h3, which stops knight g4 and solves all the problems. But it's very easy to kind of get into this mode if, let's say, you say, I master prophylaxis. I now know what my opponent's threat is, and I just stop it right away. In this particular example, we go one step beyond that. Not only we stop the threat, but we try to improve our position at the same time. That's a best prophylactic move, when you can do both things at the same time. In this particular case, the strongest move would be the rook move, one of the rooks on the d file. In the game, Tukmakov played rook f2 d1, and the idea is that if black plays knight g4, white takes on e7, black takes on f3, and once again, pause it for a moment and find a killer move for white. And the move is bishop to d6. So after this move, black's combination just fails. He's left without a lot of material. White wins. So this is our first example. Let's leave this board and go to the second example. This is a game between then Czech Grandmaster Vlastimil Hord and then world champion Anatoly Karpov. White to move. Anatoly Karpov has deservedly a reputation of probably the best prophylactic player of all times. His ability to predict the opponent's threats and ideas, he's just absolutely brilliant in the way he does it. And it's amazing that he does it so well that I would say the majority of the games he won in his chess career was based on this idea of predicting what the opponent is going to do, stop it, and eventually most of his games would end up in a position which we call domination, the situation in which he can do whatever he wants, an opponent is cramped, almost in Zugzwang, doesn't have any useful moves, and so forth. In this game, Karpov himself became a victim of prophylactic strategy. Once again, not an easy task to find out exactly what black is going to do. So if you are white, and you should be white to move, pause for a moment, ask yourself a question, what is black's next move, and think how you can proceed about it. And the answer is that black would like to play b5. In this particular case, Vlastimir's hard move was what I would call a primitive prophylactic. He simply stopped this move by playing a4. So in this particular case, the answer is relatively simple. Karpov answered with bishop c6, trying to insist on b5. And now Hort played knight e5, the move which a move ago wouldn't promise too much. If we go back in this position, if white plays knight e5, black answers b5, extending his pawns on the queen side, trying to get some space. But in this position, after a4, bishop c6, white plays knight e5, and since bishop on c6 is under attack, black almost has to take, and then I think white eventually ended up with the extra pawn. After all those trades, the pawn on c4 is hanging, and white just ends up with extra pawn and winning position. This was one of the rare games which Karpov lost, and lost rather quickly. We can close this board and move on to the next example. Here, once again, it's white to move, and now we have example from the endgame. It's a little bit different, and to some extent a little bit tricky, in the sense that once again it's not easy to predict what black's next move is going to be. It doesn't look like black has any what we would consider to be threats. Once again, when you use the idea of prophylaxis, not necessarily you are looking at threats, though maybe this is your first priority. When you ask a question, what is my opponent is going to do, first you have to think about threat. Does he have any threat? But after you realize that, let's say he doesn't have a threat, then the next question might be how he's going to improve his position. What is his plan? What is his idea? What is his next move? And if you ask this question right here, black actually doesn't have many useful moves. His knight is kind of chained to this square, because if knight moves, white, like let's say he plays knight g5. White will simply play rook f6 check, followed by knight takes d5. His rook is also doing a job. It attacks the knight on f4, and therefore stops white rook from moving. If black will play some kind of rook move, though to be honest I have a hard time finding useful rook moves, but let's say rook will go to g5. In this case, white can simply play rook h7 and wins the pawn on h6. So basically rook, by attacking the knight on f4, is tying down the rook on f7. So it seems like probably the best move for black would be to extend this pawn to b5. In which case the next move might be either b4 or king c6, so kind of making his pawn chain more flexible and getting rid of this, what possibly could be a backward pawn on b6. So after you realize that, which is, by the way, not easy, but if you kind of try it hard and you understand that the strongest move for black is b5, then again, primitive prophylaxis. You just play a4, the pawn cannot move, and black position is black is almost in Zugzwang in this position. Black's position is much worse. Plus, there are some tactics. We already mentioned why knight and rook cannot move. The only reasonable move left is king c6, in which case we'll play rook f5, threatening to take this pawn. Once again, the only move to protect this pawn, rook g5. And now, simple tactics. Pause if you don't see it, but hopefully you can see that. White to move, and he can play and win a pawn. He can play knight takes d5, and rook takes f5 runs into knight e7 check. So it's interesting how this quiet prophylactic move a4 pretty much decides the fate of the game. All right, we'll close this one, and we'll proceed to the example, which is much more complicated. This is a game in which white was Soviet Grandmaster Sergei Dolmatov, except at the time when he played this game, he was not a Grandmaster. He was a young master. And he did not find the move which turned to be the strongest move in this position. Again, it's not easy to figure out what black is going to do next. And maybe it's not the right thing to do right away. Maybe the right thing to do is to start with the question, what can I do? The most reasonable move, most chess players, when they look at this position, they see black's isolated pawn, and they know that you're supposed to blockade isolated pawn. So the most natural move seems to be knight b3 to d4. However, the drawback of this move is that for a moment you block the queen. Black can come up with a move like queen to b6. Next move will be either rook c or rook f to d8. And all of a sudden, you will find out that to continue pressure this pawn is not so easy. After all, white has his own weakness. Black might have a plan of something like bishop c5, g5 followed by bishop f4. One or another, black gets some counterplay. So the move which Sergei Dolmatov and his coach Mark Dvoretsky found later in their analysis is absolutely brilliant move. It's once again, like in the game Tukmakov Goodman, combines the idea of improving your position with the idea to stop the opponent's threat. Basically, ideally, you would like to stop this move queen b6 in the case of knight d4, and you would like to bring the rook in the game. And this brilliant move, once again, pause if you would like to find an answer by yourself. But the brilliant move for white in this position is queen g1. Very difficult move to find. But after playing this move, white is ready to play rook d1. Black queen is very limited in its movements. Like, for example, queen d7, rook d1, queen and g1 is just extremely well placed. There are possibilities of queen b6 in some moment. There is a possibility of knight c5. And of course, the main problem is this pawn. White might just play c4 and win this pawn at some point. Finding those moves is difficult, and as you can see, it's not only the ability to see the opponent's ideas, it's almost like beyond that. It's also like combination of seeing the opponent ideas and improving your position at the same time. Okay, we'll move on. The next example will be very interesting one. Once again, we are in the end game, and in this particular case, it's black to move. So what I like to think about those positions is I like to find what I call the essence of the position. You look at this position and you try to find out something which is more important than anything else. Because almost in every chess position, you can say something irrelevant. Like you can say, this pawn is not defended even once. All right? Or you can say, this is isolated pawn. However, those things are not that important. The most important thing in this position, and the reason why white is experiencing problems, the reason why black is slightly better in this position, is the fact of this knight on c5 is black's strongest piece. So if you are black, think what could be white's plan in this position. And the answer is that this knight on c5 is so great. Among other things, it obviously stops white from playing rook to g7. That white's plan is to trade this knight. It's very hard to find any other reasonable plan for white except trading this knight. And after you establish that, you will find that there are two ways for white to trade this knight. One is to play knight f4 followed by knight d3, and another one is to play knight c1 followed by knight b3. Which one do you think is more unpleasant for black? Once again, that's a question which you need to think about, because you can't stop both threats at the same time. And the answer is that knight c1 followed by knight b3 is more unpleasant, because if white will play knight f4 followed by knight d3, you can proceed with rook d8, pin this knight, and it's definitely going to be better for black. I will not go beyond that, but it's clear that that's not something you need to be concerned about. But knight c1, knight b3 is something you would like to stop. And sure enough, the best way to stop it is to play a5. And if white plays knight to c1, black is going to play a4, stop knight from coming to b3, and black's position is better. Not winning, not like a huge advantage. After all, there are opposite color bishops on the board, and in many cases, those bishops increase the probability of a draw, but unpleasant position to play for white, clearly better for black. Among other plans for black, by the way, is rook a6 and rook b6. That's another advantage of this very subtle move a7, a5. So hopefully in this short video, I gave you an idea what you should be looking for. Basically, those examples I presented are not simple examples, in the sense that even to find the opponent's idea is maybe sometimes not easy, depends on your level. However, what is important, I presented you with a method. Constantly think about what is my opponent's next move, what is his threat, what is his plan, and try to stop it if it is dangerous. Don't be paranoid, because if you stop something which is not dangerous, you eventually end up in a very passive position. You defend against everything and you end up in a passive position. But if you take it to a reasonable level, you improve your game dramatically. Maybe one more piece of advice is you can practice this approach by playing training games. You can play games, I just will warn you against playing speed games, because in this case you don't have time for this kind of thinking. When you play speed chess, only your reflexes are working. But even if you play game 15, that's already reasonable time control from time to time to stop and ask this question: what is my opponent's next move? That's probably his idea. How can I stop it and improve my position at the same time? If I can improve my position, maybe I should just play a quiet prophylactic move and stop him from doing what he wants. If you do this in the course of, let's say, 10, 15, 20 games, you will notice an improvement. This almost will become a habit of yours, and your game will go on a different level. I will come with more such examples in the future, but thank you for your attention for now.